2020 to order. At this time, we will take a silent moment of personal reflection. As a reminder, all members of council are obligated to declare a conflict of interest or a pecuniary interest as per section 133 of the Rochester Charter regarding any item on this agenda. I'll ask if there's any additions or deletions to the agenda. City Clerk?
Yes, Your Worship, we have an addition at item 8.1.3, and the addition is the I'm Off Art Collection.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Then I will move on to agenda item 3 and look for approval of the amended agenda dated October 5th. Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. I move that the amended agenda dated October 5th, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. Seconder, Councilor Fagin. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the proposed agenda? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 4 on today's agenda is the approval of the previous meeting minutes. I'll look for direction from council. Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. I move that the regular council minutes dated September 28th, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. I'll look to council for a seconder. Councilor Torreson, thank you very much. Is there any further discussion on those minutes before I call for the question? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 5, business arising from the minutes. None noted at this time. Moving on to item number 6, public presentations and acknowledgements. I do not see any public presentations. No, thank you. Item 7 is public hearings, which we'll return to at the 2 o'clock hour. Moving on to item number 8, new business, 8.1, City Manager's Office. I'll look to the City Manager.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. We present 8.1.1 Community Services Building Site Redevelopment, Sale of City Owned Land. I'll ask Captain Ducher from Economic Development to come forward. All right, I'll take this one. So the recommendation today is that Council direct administration to proceed with necessary planning processes and a request for proposal for the sale of the former community services building site located at 4419 52nd Avenue, Lloydminster, Alberta.
Good afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon.
Mayor. The former community service building site is a prime location for commercial development. In June of 2019, administration provided a detailed high-level report concluding that the community services building needed, was at the end of its serviceable life. On June 24th, 2019, Council approved the request by administration to decommission the community services building, as well as Council directed administration to bring forward a recommendation for future use of the land where the community services building was located. So, on October 28th, 2019, administration presented the City Community Facility 2019 Building Report. The report provided an update on the current situation. The community services facility included an estimated breakdown of the investment required to repair the building. On June 22nd, Council approved the award of the community services building site demolition and contracted Silverado Demolition for $185,000. And in August of 2020, administration proceeded with the demolition of the community services building, including removal of hazardous waste, as well as site rehabilitation, readying the site for redevelopment. In September of this year, administration brought forward an update with the community service building to the Governance and Priorities Committee with a direction to bring the item forward to a future regular council meeting for decision. As per the land policy, all parcels of land shall be given a listed price through resolution of council and listed publicly for sale. As this parcel is unique, the RFP process will provide clarification on the process that meets the neighborhood profile. So our next steps for this development include subdivision, redistricting, and fund allocation. Funds will be required to service the lot as needed for the potential development. So any questions about the site, about moving forward with it? Right now, we're asking that the recommendation is to proceed with the necessary planning process and a request for a proposal for the sale of the former community services site.
Thank you, Kelly. Councilman Rowe.
Yeah, just a couple of things, I guess. I had a discussion with some residents since the last GPC meeting when this was proposed, and my thought process has changed a little bit. Just wondering, we have a 50-year growth study, and I'm just questioning, what municipal services are we going to need that are going to increase in that time for that 50-year growth? I do see benefit, I guess, if there is any municipal purpose for that land, rather than I'd like to see where we're going to need more services in this municipality in order to grow. And so where is our projected space that we are going to put those services? I do see, I guess, positivity to having it all located in one location with our RCMP there, and obviously our RCMP services even in the next 50 years are going to need to expand. So I just question actually getting rid of this immediately. I just wonder if we should take a breath and think about it for a little bit more. I was having conversations even with the school division when the old St. Thomas, when they built the new St. Thomas, and they weren't sure what they were going to do with that school. And their immediate thought was to sell it. And by taking that little bit more time, it got repurposed into the Mother Teresa Early Childhood School, which has been a great asset in our community. So I guess my thought process is that yes, financially, this is a fiscal responsibility. It's a responsible move to make. We have a lot of expenses as a municipality, but on the other hand, can we wait a little bit more time just to ensure that this is the right move for our community? Because once we sell that, we can't get it back. So I see it from both sides. So I just wonder where our future growth is going to go for me as a municipality for services that we're going to require in the next 50 years.
Councilor Buckingham, followed by Councilor Dutcher.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I would echo some of those concerns. I see the potential in the value of the sale of that property being such a prime spot, and with, like it says in the RFD, with the lack of available commercial space that we have for sale in the city. So there's certainly some validity there. Future green space. Green space I don't give a lot of credit to there. I personally don't see that ever being a green space because it's relativity to commercial on the highway. But I did have somebody ask me about that. How does it play into the dark if we sell that property or we don't sell that property? The other thing I was curious about are on the sales side of the property. We have a lot of processes we have to go through to do that, to be redistricting and all of that stuff. Is the size and the shape of that particular piece of land potentially an issue for sale, or is it not really an issue for sale? There's a couple of things there. Councilor Fagner and I talked about this a little bit about the parking for the healthcare facility across the road and things like that. Would somebody like that look at it as a parking space? If so, is that something we want to do with that space? But is the size and shape of that parcel, regardless of how you redistrict it, an issue or a good thing? Those are the questions I would have on it.
So it is a small space, so it has been looked at for other city facilities. I believe in the past few years, even as close as the firewall.
We did look at when the fire hall site was chosen. We also looked at some of our other municipal facilities. City Hall already has room for expansion on the other side of here, so City Hall would be one of those things that we wouldn't be looking at expanding that for a while anyway. But if should it need expansion, it would already be done on the current site, not over there. With the library, culture and science center, those were two options that our team looked at as well, and didn't see those as viable options for those types of facilities, and didn't see at that point, at least at this point, we do about 50 years out, but we did look in the next 10, 15, 20 years out, and didn't see that site as any potential need for municipal buildings anyway. So we did have that discussion, and at least we didn't see it that way. Now we obviously want to echo your comments in terms of needing to look at that as a civic square type thing, but at this time we didn't see it as anything that was in our immediate plans.
Any other questions, Councilor Brown?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Councilor Torson, going to follow up with Councilor Donchak, pardon me, and then Councilor Torson.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, I think, those are interesting questions, and I guess, in response from the city manager, as I was looking at our immediate needs around, the library, around museum, cultural science center, other facilities, part of the challenge is around, some of the suggestions being that we can gain efficiencies by having some of these new facilities that we need built together as packages where you don't just build a library and something else, you just don't build a cultural science center. They're all packaged together, and I think the space is pretty limited in terms of its ability to manage and facilitate those kind of size of projects. I guess for me, when I look at this piece of property and this location, the other side for me is that if there's a value as the city develops where the money that's generated from this property then contribute towards the library, contribute towards the cultural science center, we're constantly looking at building those reserves so that we're not putting ourselves in a greater debt position and freeing up our dollars that we're going to be paying on an annual basis for whatever debt we incur in building these projects. So there's a benefit in that process as well that I see here. I have no idea what business would be appropriate to go in there, and relative to DART, I think one of the things that I've heard in conversations with people is creating, again, higher density dwellings and businesses that are, for instance, first 2 stories maybe businesses, and the next 3 or 5 or 8 stories then become occupied by apartments or condos, whatever it is. And that would be a logical kind of business to go in that area, because then you add that density of population to service or to go and use the facilities and businesses that you have downtown. And that's been one of the challenges to support an ongoing downtown, is that if you don't have a lot of people down there, they don't just simply walk up and go access a business. And this might be one of those opportunities where that very process could be set up and encouraged, and again, support the downtown development. But I really see the value in this asset is really supporting our long-term debt and ability to build some projects that we know we're going to have to address here within the immediate future and offset our debt load as we go forward.
Thank you, Councilor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think, first of all, I'll ask a question, and that's just as far as the subdivision part of it. So when we're talking about subdividing it, it's because it's all on the same lot as the RCMP building and City Hall. And then there's 2 options. So are we deciding on those options at a later date?
No, these options are just to give you a general idea as to what the space could be. So one of the challenges with the space, as mentioned, is that it is this kind of long, skinny piece,
right,
and then the access point. So if we were to continue with this as a commercial space, the cons of that being a smaller, skinny space with access aren't as great as if it were to be a public facility with greater needs for parking and all that sort. The site here that was included in the package is just the options that we have before us, and when we sit down with planning and engineering, we'll decide based on what's best use of the site and access.
Okay. The other question would be, are we intending to subdivide into multiple parcels, or leaving it as one big parcel so that there's lots of options for anyone who wants to potentially buy it and then subdivide it to suit their needs?
Yes. One at this point, subdivide it into one piece.
Okay.
It's not a huge parcel. That's
No,
what
I
it is.
understand It's just because of the shape, and there's different options of what you could do with it, and then there's also, limiting options in some parts of it. So that's why, to me, leaving it as the larger section of the two, I get why we would make them kind of square off. But at the same time, if you're a developer, having that extra little bit might be the difference between putting, some of the things you had in mind and not being able to put them in, and then potentially working out a deal somewhere later on in terms of that other roadway or whatever it ends up being on that other portion. So I very much agree with a lot of what Councilor Diachak said as far as our financial position. I think the idea of having the inventory as municipal reserve for some potential municipal service down the road, I think is okay. Don't get me wrong. It's looking to the future, and it's forward looking, and it's having, that kind of that asset in your pocket. But, there's also, we have a lot of other land within the city where if you really needed to put something somewhere else, we could find a way to put it somewhere else. And I get that this is on the highway, but as we move along and we are dealing with the library and dealing with the cultural and science center, I think other options will present themselves as we get through that process. I just don't see this as being an immediate city need, and not necessarily a long-term city need either. I think what we do need in the near, medium, and long term is to limit the amount of debt that we're taking on, and by not selling this land, I don't think that we'll be able to move the needle as much on the cultural and science center or the library or the downtown. I just don't think if we don't have the cash available from going through this plan, I think that it will slow all those other things down, and we'll just be able to do less. And at the end of the day, that's going to decrease quality of life within the community, not being able to do those other things. Thank you.
Councilor Fagin.
Yeah, it's interesting from both sides. One question I had, when we were putting the gazebo in a number of years ago, there was the master plan of the civic square, and I was wondering what was set for that. I tried looking through it on the archives, and I couldn't find it.
At that point, I don't believe the community services building was still on it, based on the report not being done for its end of life. So I think I believe during that plan, that the community services building was still
on
in
it.
that. Yes.
That's great. My second question would be, as far as parking goes with the RCMP, do we have enough parking currently to cover the new initiatives that are going to be going on the second floor?
So that discussion was had when we talked about the community services location. So as part of the RCMP development, a large part of the parking alongside the very east of the building, the community service building, was allotted towards the RCMP building, as well as some of the south that's not currently being used. And I think that the general consensus, like it was brought up as a concern, but our general consensus was that there would be enough for the time being.
And I'll listen, yes, we
Yeah,
can.
as a direct answer to that question, we did do a look at the parking there, and we are able to absorb the development on the second floor with the parking we currently have.
That's great. The other, as Councillor Buckingham alluded to, we did have that discussion on the parking where the two medical centers are, and I believe that that's going to be a big problem. It's a big problem right now. You can drive by there right now, and of course with the COVID and the doctors spacing everything out, there's no pressure on that. But from years and years of parking in the chamber parking lot, it's a busy place. There's no question about it. And if I was looking at buying that commercial land, I would certainly take that into consideration. It is a definite negative side of things, and it's going to be an ongoing battle with people that are going to try to access the clinics. And I certainly see the fiscal side of things and understand that side of things, but it's, I don't know. I think we're talking perhaps $1 million is what we think we're going to get for that piece of land. So I personally, I just think we need to probably take a breath and just take a look and just see what else is, what else can be done out there. And I think perhaps the doctors that run the clinic should be they should take a look at probably purchasing that land, and they've gotten away very luckily for many, many years. And I just think we need to take a breath.
Councilor Monroe?
Yeah, just a comment on Councilor Thorson's comments. Definitely, I mean, it's a fiscal responsible move. I question that we're moving just a little bit too quickly. And really I thank you for our administration to sit down and look at it. But I mean, what we can sit down 6 months from now and look at it may look different than making this decision so quickly. That's all I'm saying is that, having that revenue if it sells tomorrow, just saying everything got done and sold tomorrow. Having that revenue is just going to be in reserves because we don't have the finances right now to move ahead with any of these projects as it stands. So we have to get revenue for it. It's going to take a process before we build a new library, before any of these recreation facilities come about. So by waiting a little bit of time to sell this parcel of land, it's just, it's not decreasing in value, right? So I personally feel that by just taking a little bit more time, it's not going to make a difference whether we sell it tomorrow because we're not going to be doing anything with that revenue anyways right away. So.
Councilor?
I
Councilor Thorson?
just had a slight rebuttal, and one would be that there's an expense to maintain that over that period versus if we have that cash in the bank, we could at least invest it until we're prepared to build a library or a cultural and science center. So in one case, it might cost, or you're going to have, let's say $15,000 in cost over the next 4 or 5 years, and the other one you may have paid the equivalent. So only a $30,000 difference maybe, I don't know, but at the same time, if you're planning on doing that eventually anyway, then do it.
Councilor Monroe?
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and I respect that. I sat here last week and I was definitely in favor of the sale. Now what I've heard from residents is that why are we doing it so quickly? And when I've seen other organizations in our community that have been in a similar situation and going to move in this direction, and then actually came up with a solution to be able to repurpose that land for their own use. So that's where my question is coming into play, that, maybe we should just take a little bit more time.
Good question. Councilor Dodger?
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting this, that we, pass a motion and subdivide and put it up for sale tomorrow. And I'm not sure that's what I'm hearing either as well, because I don't know what the market is up there at this point in time. And certainly I'd want to be selling this property when the market was hot. and for the value as opposed to, when our economy is down and slow. So I think we can still do this with the understanding that if we are going to sell it, that we would do it to ensure that we get the maximum value for that property. And again, the location of this property is unique. It also has a unique size, which is really not, I think, a benefit to us at this point. But knowing that, perhaps the business people knowing that this property is there might also lead them to inquire and give them cause for thinking about what kind of developments they might want to put in the city as well. Because I think if people don't think it's available, then there's no interest. Nobody's coming knocking on the door. So I think there's kind of 2 parts to this. So like you want to go out and see what's available and what the interest is, and if the interest comes back and it's not there and it's not the money we want, we don't have to sell.
I think that's where it leads to the end here. I've got a couple questions, but go ahead.
Sure. Just the one comment on Brandon said, there's the capital side of the, that you get from the sale of land, but there's also the ongoing tax revenue that you receive on an annual basis that helps. And when you get prime property like this on Highway 17, or sorry, Highway 16, that we're guessing would sell. We have had interest when this discussion has come up. You're right, we're not sure, nobody knows the price yet in terms of what we talked about, but the ongoing tax revenue is just as important as the $1 million and the X dollars that we would get in our bank account. So that's something that we should consider as well.
I've got a couple questions that might answer some of the questions on the table, I think, if I may.
Sounds good.
Excuse me, in the proposal, can you just give us a time frame of walking through some of the steps that you're asking in the motion? So there's a motion or a request to the necessary planning processes. How long is land division or the city expecting to take to get to step 1?
I believe we could do it as little as 3 months. I think that's the correct timeline for a subdivision, as long as there's no hiccups.
No hiccups, so minimum of 3 months is what we're saying.
Yep.
Then there would be a request for proposal, which could easily add a month to a month and a half.
Yep.
And then
Yes.
it would, before any sale is completed, it would have to come back to the next council of this city to make a final decision if there was a proposal that was entertained, that the administration felt that the city would entertain.
Depending on the price, I believe, as long as the price was within.
Land sale policy talks about market value. If it's done within market value, then the administration can proceed. If council felt, given this property, that you wanted to approve it, that could be a condition of the motion that, you know, any sale, but could come back to council for approval. But I believe within the current policy that as long as it's sold within market value, that the administration has that authority to do that.
Councilman Monroe.
So it just says fund allocation, that funds will be required to proceed with this process. So do you have an estimate on what those funds will be?
I don't at this point. So when the building was decommissioned and the site was returned kind of to redevelopment stage, the utilities were removed. So depending on what business or what the build looked like, that's when we would build to suit and put those utilities in as needed.
Or it could be part of your land sale agreement as well, through you know, depending on where the buildings are located, where you service from, and John would know more about that in terms of the services in it.
Yes, exactly, and costs will depend on what services are going in or what use, so, you know, Councilor Diachuk talked about main floor, commercial, and then high density above would require a different service than just having commercial CRE. So we would, once we know what it is, then we would, again, like Calvin said, we would develop a plan to suit and then put those in, and that can be a part of the sales agreement.
So by
Go ahead,
So by
Councilman.
taking that time to this process, this 3 months and then another month on that, and depending on whether or not we actually service the property, it gives us a little bit more time just to completely, do you see, I guess, any reason why, even if we decided not to proceed with this, that by subdividing it, it would cause an obstacle for the city, should we decide to keep it?
To me, if you're not going to sell it, then why we probably wouldn't subdivide. That would be my
Right.
initial
Okay.
thought.
All right. Councilor Forrester. Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Just as we were talking about this parking and stuff, I just keep coming back to the shot of the site where that red line goes across the top corner. If a guy was worried about that future development for the RCMP or any of that stuff there, you know, having parked in that site and worked there, subdivide that red line off and extend that parking lot over, a guy could probably do that in this process too, and only sell the other option 3 area inside there, right?
That's an option, yeah.
It kind of squares off the lot a little bit too.
Yeah,
but-
one of them creates a,
Yeah, it does, but just an option is that parking lot is a parking lot right to where that is now, right? So a guy could potentially alleviate some of that pressure in that building there by doing that.
Executive Magistrate.
Yeah, just to speak to that a little bit, if you do that, then there's potential issues with access to the site. So right now, where the black line is, option 1 would be split right down the middle of that access, and it would be shared access between Legacy, RCMP, or City Square, we'll call it, and this development. So that would definitely need to be taken into consideration when we determine where the property lines are upon subdivision.
And even the blue line on the bottom, you know, if you're talking about the medical clinic, if they were looking to buy that one chunk of property, there's options there.
I guess that'd be a question for future subdivision if that was the case. So there's certainly options that are available. I think that's you know, if this is passed, I'm sure administration will look at those options and see what is best from the perspective of the city. Councilor Diachuk.
so I guess, Worship, what I'm seeing is potentially creating the biggest piece of property first with the option still available to partition off. So if somebody wants to look at that north part of the square foot parking, I'm pretty certain they're not going to want to invest money for the entire piece for parking, but they might be interested in part of it for parking. On the other hand, if there's a facility that's built there, they may want to share the parking. So there's all these other options. So I think, moving to an option has a choice that has more options available going, down the road is probably the best, which is to create the largest piece, and then if you want to reduce it, you still have the increasing it. I think it puts you in a different spot. It's always easier to downsize than try to make it bigger as you go.
Those are all pieces of the puzzle to be considered. That access agreement and that shared parking agreement are all pieces towards future development.
So then, that would be the interesting part. Would it be the subdivision first? That would be the piece that would be interesting, because you'd have to possibly readjust the subdivision depending on the option chosen. As an example, if we went out and decided, administration felt option 1 was the best one, and then they, when the bids came back, they said we'd really like to option 2 and square it up. Would that be another subdivision requirement?
Yeah, you'd only want to go through subdivision once, so you could put out your RFP based on option 1. Hold off subdivision until you know what the plan would be, and then you could proceed with subdivision from there. You don't need to do, I might be speaking out of turn, but I don't think you need to subdivide before your RFP, but it would be a condition of sale that it would be subdivided upon sale agreement.
And second, I think there's a little bit of question about value that would be arrived at based on an appraisal.
Yeah,
to the city.
our current appraisal, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Buckingham.
Thanks, Your Worship. My question is, what does the motion become? Based on the 3 options that were given here, because the understanding or the feeling I'm kind of getting here is that council direct administration to proceed with the necessary planning processes on the community services building at the location, perhaps removing the request for proposal for the sale of at this time. I'm asking just from what.
I guess that just hearing what I've heard from administration, we would tie their hands, because if you're going to sell the property potentially, you're going to, I believe the administration is saying they would in essence open it for inquiries or proposals. If you subdivide it first, as we just talked about, then you're back to subdividing the second time. If you don't, at least see what the marketplace brings, subject to that way. Is that the correct understanding I had from administration?
So we have in other instances subdivided upon request of the purchaser. So I think right now it's asking for recommendation to sell.
Right, so if in fact that's the case, we talked about bringing that back to council before conclusion of said sale. Or does this motion give full authority to just sell? I just want to make sure that I'm 100% clear on what we're asking here.
Well, I'll look to administration to clarify that, please.
Yeah, the intention of this motion is for administration to have the authority to sell its property.
Thank you. Councilor Godchik?
Yeah, and I guess there is a catch in that process though, because part of the planning process is to do a market assessment. So if you put it up for sale and you don't get the money you want for it, then you're not going to subdivide it and you're not going to sell it. So I think part of that is, those are all those steps that are built into that planning process. So just saying you want to sell it doesn't mean you can actually sell it, because someone says, "We'll give you $1 and you want $1 million, there's no sale. And I think ultimately, if I'm gathering this accurately, then the planning process is going to allow let's say, a developer to come in and want to subdivide, which still comes back to us at council. It requires our approval. And that's not what we're doing today. We're just saying we're going to proceed with this process of planning.
Back to what city manager said, the resolutions for us to sell that, in order for us to sell that, we have to do an RFP, we have to do subdivision, we have to do all those functions. The order of those functions doesn't necessarily need to be represented in the resolution, but it needs to be there. So if we're giving administration authority to go ahead, all those functions need to happen. Again, with those functions, there's an approval of council, subdivision, and then again, council wants the sale agreement to come back for final approval before executing, that can also be added in as well. This motion gives administration the ability to do all the things required in order to disperse that property.
Councilor Thorson and Councilor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that what Executive Manager Stang probably, or hopefully put a lot of people at ease as far as, one, this will still have to come back to a future council to make the final decision, because whatever the order is, whether it's at subdivision or whether it's sale price or whatever that ends up being, council will still have to agree and go through the subdivision process no matter what happens, because it's part of our duties in the development process. So at that point, that's when the real decision is made. But the decision to see what can we get for it, what could potentially be the development going there, and what the benefit to the city could be from that, I think it's important to know, especially when we have some of these things we need to pay for in the short term and in the medium and long term. So I would support starting to move forward on it today to get the process rolling, to be able to see what we can get for that property and what could potentially be going there. Thank you.
Councilor Miller.
So that was laid out a lot differently than I think previously I had understood. I understood previously that by making this motion today, everything proceeds without it having to come back to council. So with it having to come back to council regardless, then that decision is not being made today, and really what we're doing is just getting more information by moving forward.
Your Worship, I have misspoken. I think I was incorrect. I'm going to grab Terry Burton to walk us through that subdivision process, because I don't think, based on what he just texted me, subdivision comes back to council. So I'll just grab him and let him speak to that so we have all correct information on the table.
Thank you, Executive Manager Stang. And I think Marilyn just wanted to grab him.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring up that point. I felt that there was some confusion as to exactly what it was that we were moving forward with here, so.
Subdivision generally approved by the city manager,
That's good.
So, I guess,
Right. It can
is-
just go through without coming back here.
that was
Other
it.
than if you wanted to set the price, if you wanted a condition that comes back to council, then
We'd have to change that.
So is there a zoning requirement to come back to council in that though?
Yeah. You'd have to change it to highway commercial.
Right, it'd have to be restricted, distributing, so I think there is that opportunity, but we can confirm that. So,
Yeah, because it's DC. Someone's gonna go to highway. Terry.
certainly, welcome Terry, I'm looking forward to, you're gonna clarify, you're gonna actually clear the murk away here. It's gonna be clear sailing.
So what I'm hearing is two questions on the floor, one dealing with subdivision side of things, another one probably land use changes, am I correct? Okay. Subdivision, the process right now that we have in place as part of the land use bylaw, I do believe, or the subdivision bylaw, sorry, has the city manager having the authority to sign up on those things. So subdivision will have to be, is handled by administration in this case. The land use side of things is, this location is DC1 right now, so any change within that DC1 would have to come back to council for approval. So if they weren't aligned with DC1, they still have to come forward to council for approval on that one.
And if it did come into DC1, if it meet the requirements, it would still have to come to council for approval.
Direct control puts that into this realm for sure. So it'd be more of a site plan review, whether it fits, whether this council believes it fits and everything else too. Yeah.
Thanks, Terry.
I think that answers everybody's question, I believe.
Absolutely. So no matter what, this would have to come back to council. That was my question, it's just that I don't want to be making this decision that is permanent and set in stone today. I just feel like this gives us administration, a new council, a little bit more time to make a decision exactly on what we're doing, and more information will be provided to that council when they come back, once they put it out for RFP. So much appreciated clarification.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Terry, for the clarification. Thank you, Executive Manager Stang, for ensuring that the information was,
I apologize for mixing up subdivision and
we'll make a note of that. So with that, I'll look for direction from council on 8.1.1. Councilor Monroe.
That council direct administration to proceed with the necessary planning process and a request for proposal for the sale of the former Community Services Building located at 4419 52nd Avenue, Lloydminster, Alberta.
Seconder, Councillor Franklin, thank you very much. Is there any further discussion of the motion on the floor? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. It has reached just past the 2 o'clock hour, so Kathleen, if I could ask you to join us for a few moments, we will move to the public hearing and continue on with the agenda at that point afterwards. So we're returning back to agenda of 7, which is the public hearings. Okay, we'll give him a moment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Please.
So, Ray, just to explain to the gallery why I pause, it's really right for Councilor Belichick to return, because if he's not present for the public hearing, he cannot rule in the bylaws.
Council, if I can thank you. I would like to note before we begin that during the public hearing, we ask that you respect the views of everyone here and allow each person their time to speak without interruption. Each person wishing to speak has up to 5 minutes to make a presentation to council. All discussions of council members, city staff, and delegations shall be directed to the chairperson. Any questions brought forward by the public, which are not able to be addressed during this meeting, will be done so at the next council meeting. Council will not debate this matter during the hearing. The decision regarding whether to grant the bylaw future readings will be dealt with following the public hearing. I declare the public hearing for bylaw number 32-2020, the Northeast Area Structure Plan, open at 2:13 p.m. I would ask the city clerk to confirm whether this public hearing has been advertised in accordance with the applicable legislation and to summarize the purpose of the hearing.
I confirm that this public hearing has been advertised, and a notice has been provided in accordance with the applicable legislation. This public hearing was advertised in the regular source on September 17th, September 24th, and October 1st, 2020. Purpose of this public hearing is for bylaw number 32-2020, the Northeast Area Structure Plan.
Thank you, City Clerk. I will now call upon anyone wishing to speak who is opposed to the proposed bylaw. Not seeing anyone rise, I will now call upon anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed bylaw. Good afternoon, sir. I would ask you to please introduce yourself and state whether or not you are in favor, opposed, or affected by the proposed bylaw. You will have 5 minutes to make your presentation to council. When you are finished speaking, please remain at the front as council may wish to ask you questions. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Your Worship. My name is Darrell Dunn. I'm speaking in favor of the council. Good afternoon, council members. You have the written submission in front of you, and I presume you've either had the chance to read it or can read it. I'd like to move a little bit beyond change the protocol just a touch and address a couple of points that I think are important beyond the written submission. Councillor Diachuk said the last time this was here that this document, and I bring this as a bit of a prop. It's a big document, it's a thorough document, it has a ton of information in it, and it's a very well-written document. And he indicated at that point that if you take the time to drill down into it, there's some really interesting stuff, and he's right. Now from that point, the question that hit me as I went through it and got some of this information is how do we communicate this to the larger community? Because there's some great stuff in here. Some of us on the weekend met with a young man by the name of Ben Harrison, and he did a downtown walking discussion looking at primarily the dark, but not just the dark, looking at development in the larger context. And he's a young man that is a young professional at Lakeland College, and he and his wife.
Mr. Dunn, can I ask you to address specifically the actual area structure plan bylaw? I think that I hear you're
Okay.
Okay, if I may, please.
The bylaw itself, I think, deals with a number of things. First of all, it's amazing looking at the water supply, the water sewer, and rainwater situation, how much infrastructure it takes, how much money it takes, and how much planning it takes for that piece to go forward. It also, the bylaw needs to go forward to put this whole process into effect, and things can move forward in terms of not just the planning, but allocating resources and communicating to the larger community what some of the detail of this plan entails and how it links with other parts and pieces of the planning that goes on in the city. And I think that in terms of the direct comments is what I have to say. I think as a final statement, basically failing to plan means you plan to fail. So the planning is well worth the effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. If you'd like to just remain, if there's any questions, I'll just let the council see if there's any questions regarding the presentation. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the proposed bylaw? I will now call upon anyone else wishing to speak who is affected by the proposed bylaw. I would like to thank all presenters for their comments. I now declare the public hearing for bylaw number 32-2020 closed at 2:17 p.m. I declare the public hearing for bylaw number 33-2020, the Municipal Development Plan Amendment, open at 2:17 p.m. I would ask the city clerk to confirm whether this public hearing has been advertised in accordance with the applicable legislation and to summarize the purpose of the hearing.
I confirm that this public hearing has been advertised and notice has been provided in accordance with the applicable legislation. This public hearing was advertised in the Meridian Source on September 17th, September 24th, and October 1st, 2020. Purpose of this public hearing is for bylaw number 33-2020, being a bylaw to amend map 2 future land use concept of the municipal development plan.
Thank you, City Clerk. I will now call upon anyone wishing to speak who is opposed to the proposed bylaw. Not seeing anyone come forward, I will now call upon anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed bylaw. Not seeing anyone come forward, I will now call upon anyone else wishing to speak who is affected by the proposed bylaw. As no members of the public were in attendance to speak on the matter, I declare the public hearing for bylaw number 33-2020 closed at 2:21 p.m. Returning back to the agenda of 8.1.2, I'll look to the City Manager.
Thank you, Worship, for 8.1.2, the e-commerce support grant. I'll ask Captain Butcher to come forward and present.
Good afternoon again, Mayor and Council.
Thank you again, Callie.
Today, I would like to recommend that Council authorize a reallocation of $20,000 from the 2020 operational budget for the e-commerce grant to assist businesses in their transition to online during the COVID-19 pandemic. As we are all well aware, that March 2020 has changed the landscape for business community. Saskatchewan deemed that non-allowable business services would be unable to provide public-facing services, and business scrambled to get online in order to virtually keep their doors open. The e-commerce support grant is in response to that and would help some of those businesses as they continue to struggle through COVID-19. We're proposing the maximum funding is 100% available costs to a maximum of $500 per application. Proposing the reallocation of $20,000 from the 2020 operational budget. And we hope to assist 40 businesses who have pivoted online from March of 2020 on. The amount of funds allocated are at the discretion of the City Manager, Economic Development Officer, and are based on the maximum amount under the program, available funds, and the scope and nature of that application. There are a number of eligible expenses that can be submitted under the application. They must be expenses that happened after March 16th of 2020. To be considered, they must be a small business under 50 employees. They must be a resident within the city, and they must have a business license. Some of the following categories include logistics and shipping, so delivering of services or goods, curbside pickup and drop-off boxes, tracking services that were used or have continued to be used, e-commerce, web development, web hosting, e-commerce platforms, including the Square, and the tools used to collect dollars from customers, marketing and promotions, paid photos, paid social, media and advertising expenses, and copywriting, as well as cybersecurity for those businesses who had to move services online for signature and such. An initial application deadline would be set, advertised through Economic Development e-newsletter and other available medias. After the initial intake, if funds are still available, additional applications would be considered on first-come, first basis. So I'm looking towards you for recommendation.
Thank you, Kelly. Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. In spirit, I love the idea. It's important to me that we're looking at something like this, so I'll preface my remarks with that. But how do we make it fair, equitable, and defendable to the community? Is it a nice to have right now, a nice thing for the city to do, or is it something the city needs to do, considering the financial realities we're all facing in today's day and age? How do you defend giving this with this set of circumstances? And there's a lot of businesses that don't qualify. Will this call it small or medium, $500 per business grant, will it move the needle for the amount of companies that are going to be able to qualify for this, right? How do we make it fair? And is it something we should be doing at all times? Does the city need to be everything to everybody? Is our economic development platform here that we're going to use to reallocate this funding, is it good, equitable use of that funding for the amount of people that we're going to reach? And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm against it either. I just think that those questions are fair and need to be answered before we move forward with this type of thing. If we're going to sit here and be good stewards of the city, and like I said, in the spirit of it, I agree. But I think there's some more discussion that can be had around this. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gotcha.
Worship, I think those are really good questions, Councillor Buckingham, and I think some of the discussions that I've had with people in business and committees that we sat around discussing this really have asked those same questions. I think one of the pieces that is important is that when surveys have done within our community, one of the responses has been, the city needs to be able to help out. And there was a range of topics on there. Why shouldn't this, perhaps the city could lend the money or front money or do those things. And I think that's unreasonable because I don't see the city being a banker or other organizations, maybe futures, and we've heard presentations of people who can access loans and support them in the community. But what I think an important point to not be lost here is that many of the small businesses that are in our communities are at the edge. And what does that edge look like? And I think it looks different for a lot of different businesses depending who you are, where you are, and what you've done. And I think part of this is there's a message that goes out to those community businesses that are here, that have been here for a while, is that, we can't give you much right now, but many of you have changed your business plan. You've pivoted, you've made some changes, and here's something to let you know that we care about you in this community. We want to support you, we want to keep you open, and we want you to stay with us after COVID. There's no magic pill here to say we're going to provide all the support and run your business for you, because I don't think any business would expect us to do that. And that's not why we get into it. They're not looking for a handout, but there are businesses that have had to make changes and and again, successfully as well, around that process. So I think part of this is a bit of a message and a handout to say, this may not be much, but a little bit here might be able to help you. And as I said, I think even when it comes to taxes, we talked a bit about our budget. We don't know how far off people are from that breaking point in their budgets and what they're doing. The $500 could actually be a pretty significant step for some. It could be trivial for others. And I'm not sure that's our place to decide that. It's our place to decide whether or not, in fact, we want to reach out and try to support them, and within our means. And I think that's the other part of it relative to that support we provide. And that's sort of the context around this, this discussions we've had around it. Would it be nice to offer more? The question would be for what? Our intent is not to go out and support businesses in a loan capacity. Federal government has a number of programs that some people have taken advantage, others have refused to take advantage of. And again, that's the choice to do that. It's also the choice to apply for this if they don't want to.
Councillor Buckingham.
Thanks, Your Worship. And I didn't declare for this and leave the room because my business doesn't qualify for this. Even if I wasn't sitting around here as a city councilor, my business doesn't qualify for this. And it's particularly why I didn't declare for this, because my business doesn't qualify for anything. Through any of the federal programs that have been out, I have got zero. I've been able to apply for zero, although my business has been greatly affected. And this is yet another program that doesn't apply to a business owner like myself. So the question I wanted to bring up is this, if we want to do something as a city, yes we can, no we can't, yes we should, no we shouldn't. Is it the right thing? Is it the thing that's going to help the most people by giving these parameters to this program? Or is it going to be a bunch more businesses that have fallen through the cracks that can't even apply? So just a discussion I wanted to have to let you know that a business like mine, again, misses the boat.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I just, when this was presented to us at GPC a few weeks ago, I know I shared a few thoughts about it as far as, is $500 enough to move the needle for any one individual business when it's dealing with these things? And then I made statements as far as, ensuring that we're spending it on the right things, all that other stuff, the accountability piece of it. Part of me wants to throw away all those comments because in the grand scheme of things, it's not a tremendous amount of money in $20,000. But, you know, to a business that maybe just needs that little boost so that they can start some kind of online presence, it can be pretty big. I was talking to someone recently, an aunt of mine who has a store and they have an online presence as well. And they've been saying that, you know, through COVID, their online presence kept their business going. It was the difference between existing and non-existing. From still renting a property within the city or paying property taxes or whatever the case is, and not existing. So my only beef with this particular item is I wish we could do more. I wish that we had more funds within our budget to be able to do more if that's the direction that we're taking with it. So that, you know, maybe tighten some things up so that a handful of businesses within certain parameters could actually get all the way there. But, you know, that's just, it's not really feasible with the amount of budget that we have. So it's hard to find a balance as to what the right amount is, with the right number of businesses, and what specific activities it is, and without making it overly burdensome on the city to administer if we try and tighten it up too much. So that's where all those challenges come in. And then the other side is, there's an election coming up, a municipal one. This is definitely going to look like to other people that you're just trying to buy people's votes. That's absolutely the way they're going to look at it. And there's the sincerity behind doing it and the idea that came from other channels through the Economic Development Task Force that's been dealing with COVID-19 and startup that is bringing these ideas forward. All that's going to fall apart and it's just going to look bad on the city. Or bad on the city council, I suppose. I'm talking to my fellow councilors when I say that. So it's got a lot of hair on it, this one. But to be honest with you, for the $20,000 that fits within our budget, for the fact that it will help a handful of businesses, about 40, get a little bit closer to moving online, and if we end up having a second shutdown to a certain extent, that might keep a handful of people employed just by having the ability to go online for a second shutdown. And for that reason alone, I think I would support this motion.
Councilman Rowe.
So echo a lot of what the other councillors said, but just to clarify, it's not for businesses that are wanting to go online, it's for businesses that have already adapted. Is that correct?
So if there was a business, say tomorrow,
Yeah.
you know, they paid for their Squarespace subscription, those would be included in the application process. as
Right,
well.
but
So
once you open the application process, and then they decide to go online, they're still included as well?
Yep.
Okay, as long as they have.
Yeah.
But they can't get the grant first and then use the money.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
No, they would have to show proof of purchase, invoice, receipt, yes.
For sure. And I mean, last week I did mention, I wasn't sure how much it really moved the needle for a lot of different businesses, but to sit back and rethink this and having the conversations with different residents, $500 to buy a website and to get your e-commerce shop up and running definitely covers those costs. And a lot of those individuals had to adapt. And I think it's very important for us to realize that, you know what, you did what you could to try and keep your business afloat. And now because we do have it in our budget, I think it's important for us to show as a city that we do support those businesses. And we are grateful for them, and they are part of our community. And if they weren't in our community, people would go elsewhere. So, you know, it's important for us to show that investment back, that we are supporting them and we're doing what we can. Of course, like Councilor Torres said, we wish we could do more, but you have to be also fiscally responsible, right? So I think by offering something, it's showing initiative that the city is willing to work with these businesses. It's unfortunate, like Councilor Buckingham said, that, you know, there are some businesses that there is nothing that applies to them. And that is unfortunate, but we do have to set some parameters. So, you know, we're showcasing what businesses we are able to help. And if it was a free-for-all, we wouldn't be able to possibly have a program in place. So I commend the Economic Development and the task force for coming up with different ideas like this. It's innovative, it's showing that we're willing to invest in our community, and the fact that it was already within our budget makes a huge difference. We're not just trying to take this money from other streams for reserves. We already did have the money allocated for. So I'm definitely in favor of it, and I think the only part is going to be trying to limit the businesses that do apply. So.
Councilor Craig.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea, and I do like the fact that it was through the economic development initiative that it has come forward. And I think that there's so little that we can do for the businesses. This is one thing that we can do. It's just a small little part, and I think it'll go a long way. I never thought about buying votes from that way, but I guess you got to look at it from different angles. I just think that that we're doing the right thing and giving a little bit of assistance where we can, and I would be for this.
Councilor Dodger.
Yeah, I never quite thought of it buying votes. I always thought of it as buying businesses so that they could actually perhaps be here to vote and stay and continue. I can't remember the stat. I guess Catlin, was it 14 or 17% that said they weren't sure they're going to be able to.
16%.
16%.
Yep.
Businesses weren't sure they're going to be able to reopen once the economy is up and running again.
Yep, those are right in April.
And so that's a pretty significant impact when you begin to look at, what's 16%? 1 out of 9 or 1 out of 8? 1 out of 7. Let's go 1 out of 7 businesses that may not reopen once COVID, sort of clears and people are back at it. I would want to pursue, I guess, more discussion relative to what Councilor Buckingham has in terms of businesses perhaps that don't qualify for programs that are available through, existing channels that we have now. What do those businesses look like? Because the intent is not to overlook, omit, exclude, but you don't know what you don't know, I guess, and that's part of that process. So what are those businesses that, perhaps are being missed in all of this? And that's something through economic development or what are the folks that we're working with around this might have an opportunity to explore and dig deeper. Because it might be, the lost child where nobody's really looking out for them. And I know that we've seen that relative to the national programs that as the opposition and other people speak out, they're finding programs and businesses that aren't being covered and not being addressed through the processes. And it's not because it's deliberate, it's just because, you're trying to get stuff out the door. So I appreciate the comment. I think it should be one we should take into consideration going forward and see whether or not there can be something there, or some assistance provided for those businesses that don't quite seem to fit in any one specific category.
Okay, Councilor Buckingham, followed by Councilor Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. One last question I have is, what are we not doing now? So if we're going to reallocate, I didn't find anywhere in here where it said that we were reallocating budget of $20,000 from something specific. What are we not going to do if we're going to do this?
Some of the funding was event specific, so events that can't happen at this time because of COVID. So some of those dollars would be allocated towards this.
Yeah, it just didn't say anywhere that we were taking it from here to put it there. So we've got canceled events and things that we would have been going to that makes total sense to reallocate it for that. So I just wanted to have that discussion because it wasn't there. So thank you.
Councilor Monroe.
Yeah, so programs like this, not only for businesses, but I think are really important in your community, whether it's for downtown improvements for facades or businesses that are going to be investing in your business or anything like that. So I think the long term, what I would like to see from this is some sort of reporting mechanism. So, by giving us $500, this many businesses in 6 months were able to keep their doors open, this many within a year. So it shows you next year, if this is successful, and by investing in our community, investing in our businesses, that they are able to be successful. So, it shows also in subsequent years, if this is a long-term granting process that the city was to implement for businesses with certain criteria, that, we're getting this investment back. And this is what we're able to do because of this. It's easier to justify to the residents and to taxpayers and to the entire community as a whole by your having process and the success rate of it, right? So I'd be interested in something like that and just to see, what it's actually doing to these businesses. If you give a grant like this and you say, well, 6 months down the road, they will all shut their doors anyways, right? Then it's like, okay, well, either the dollar amount wasn't high enough or there was what other process or what other obstacles were in place for those businesses to not be successful. So I would be interested in that kind of documentation following up.
Absolutely.
City Manager.
Yeah, just to follow up on that point, it's a very good point. And we look at other municipalities and there are similar programs, not some are related to COVID as we speak, but there's other municipalities that offer ongoing programs for different types that are maybe not for e-commerce, but it might be a little more overarching, a little more wider spectrum in terms of what they offer, but there are always like small incentives for some are for startups, some are for ongoing business, some are for different projects, but it is something we have looked at and this is, if approved, this would be a nice little test for us to see what the interest is in the community.
So if this was successful, is there any plans in 2021 to potentially extend this budget presentation that we received the other day?
No, there isn't anything in the 2021 budget for this specific
Okay.
project.
Is,
Sorry, to follow up on that, if successful, though, there would be an opportunity that, before budget's finalized, that we could add to that if that was something council wished.
okay, thank you. What is administration proposing as an application date to start if this is moved today or carried today by council?
I think we can begin immediately. It's a very simple application, and with our e-newsletter, we can get that out to the business community very quickly.
Okay, and we have, I imagine, I know this answer, but for people, give us an idea, what kind of contact list do we have through economic development today for our local businesses?
I believe we have 1,600 businesses, direct contacts,
Sure.
through email.
Okay, excellent. So, and like you say, all we can do is see where the applications come forward, and from there, and remind people that it is first come, first served. The one question I just want to be absolutely crystal clear, it has to be a business within the city limits, correct?
Within the city limits and with a business license.
With a business license, but the owner of the business does not have to necessarily be a resident of the city.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Your worship, you said first come, first served. There is prior to the first, since GBC, the first intake would be an application deadline.
Okay.
And then following that, if only X number of dollars are used or some left over, then we would turn it into a first come, first served basis, but we didn't want it to be as per the comments of the GBC, there was a number of concerns that the first one would get the application, they don't get the money. So the first set would be based on a defined date, and then following that, if there's still dollars left, then it would be a first come, first served.
Thank you. And that dates, and that would be communicated through economic development, through the communications team in the city to ensure that information is provided. Councilor Dodge.
Yeah, I think it's really it's an interesting dilemma that we're in, an interesting spot. And I appreciate the comments about, getting it right and fairness and all those other pieces. But sometimes you end up doing nothing in that process. And I think we need to do something.
Absolutely.
And we need to be perceived as doing something. And it likely will not be absolutely perfect. But it will mean that we're doing something as opposed to sitting by and doing nothing and trying to get it right. And I think it's part of that process of moving and working with it and finding what's going to happen. Again, I just commend Catlin and the work that's being done there. There's a lot of discussions, a lot of ideas. As the city manager pointed out, I know that driving into Mundare, buy the lot or build your business and no taxes for 3 years. So people are trying a lot of things out there to get people to come move in, set up businesses and all other things, so that, there's a cost that comes with that over the 3-year period where these communities are being built. I don't know how to support the infrastructure cost, because that still has to be part of bringing new businesses in. But people are really needing to try to do something as opposed to sitting back and being sort of paralyzed by, the lack of money or how much money you have, or, what do we do to get the great, more people involved. Well, you get as many as you can and you do something and begin the process and move on.
Councilor Monroe.
Yeah, just one last comment. I'm definitely very much in favor of this program, but I wouldn't really say, even if we didn't have this program, that we were really doing nothing. We do have other resources in place with startup, with community futures, and even our IMT, right? That was very supportive of businesses with their restarts and what process needs to be in place in terms of regulations and guidance. So even if this program wasn't in place, I think we've done a really good job of trying to be as supportive for our business community as possible. So definitely in favor of the program, but I think there are sometimes things like that that overlooked just because you're not monetary-wise giving support to the businesses. We are otherwise doing things to help them proceed and keep their doors open besides just the monetary. So I think that's important to know as well.
And I would add to that I think we can't forget tax penalty moving to November 10th for this year's property taxes from July, as well as the utility relief that for late charges. I think those were very much taken at the front end of COVID by this council for both businesses and residents. So again, I know there was a great deal of discussion at that time, but I don't think we can put that, it's helped, I'm sure, with some local businesses, and have seen a great deal of uptake lately with the upgrade or turnaround. And I know that I'm glad to see them back open, and we will endeavor to ensure that hopefully they keep moving forward from their perspective. And I think that this is just another piece of the pieces to deal with COVID. And as we know, we don't have an end date in play yet, so until that is there, this council and other councils will be forced to deal with it accordingly. Any other comments? Not seeing any, I will look for direction on 8.1.2 e-commerce support grant. Councilor Monroe.
That council authorized the reallocation of $20,000 from the 2020 operational budget for the e-commerce grant to assist local businesses in their online transition during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Seconder? Councilor Fagin. Thank you. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Callie. Moving on to 8.1.3, City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. The matter before you is the Imhoff Art Collection, and the recommendation is that council approve the payment of $500,000 to the Imhoff Heritage Society for the decommissioning of the Imhoff Art Collection from the Lloydminster Culture and Science Center to be funded from the Lcsc Reserve Number 1-700-761-37115. And furthermore, that the payment be subject to the finalization of all required legal documentation between the parties to properly release the existing agreement to house the collection. The background is earlier this year, administration was directed to negotiate lease rate for the temporary relocation of the Lcsc, with final decision being made at the June 22nd, 2020 regular council meeting to permanently close the Lcsc. With this move, some parts of the collection will be moved to a new lease space, while some will be decommissioned from the collection. The Imhoff Art Collection has been on display at the Lcsc since 1983, with an agreement in place to display the collection for a period of 99 years, which would be until 2082. So we have 63 years remaining, including 2020, at a cost of about the current contract is, our allocation is $10,000 per year for the agreement. With the decommissioning of the Lcsc prior to the expiry of the agreement, administration has worked collaboratively with the Imhoff Heritage Society to come to a mutually agreed upon compensation for the early termination of the agreement. In addition to the payment for decommissioning the art collection, the city has agreed to cover the cost of creating the collection, which is estimated at about $15,000. Once created, the Imhoff Heritage Society would be responsible for the transportation of the collection from the Lcsc to its new location with the society. I turn it back to you, Your Worship, if there are any other questions.
Thank you, City Manager. Questions or comments? Councilor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just a comment on overall. In a way, it's unfortunate that it works out this way and that there's a $500,000 bill coming with this. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who are very fond of the Imhoff Art Collection, but the reality that we're living in with the Cultural Design Center is that building is well past its best before date, and it can no longer house these paintings. So when ultimately the Cultural Design Center moves into a new building, it was not built, I don't believe, with a design large enough to house all these paintings. So the question would be, well, if you can't have all of them, could you have some? Yes, but then would you have a place that we could afford to actually store them at the proper temperatures and everything else during that time? And the answer is no. So then the question would be, what happens if something happens to the paintings while you're waiting for, some chance in the future to be able to show them again? And if something happens to them, then you would end up having to buy them outright, and the cost would be even greater. So there's a lot to go with this, and I just think that at the end of the day, that collection's been on display since I was a small child. I remember going into the Cultural Design Center when I was in grade 4, and then I went again as a member of council, and the exact same paintings were in the exact same spots. And I don't believe that they were drawing in a significant number of people, and I think that what we heard from, you know, the different user groups is the things that draw people in are the rotating exhibitions that are the traveling exhibitions that are coming from out of town, and also the local art that's going up there on a regular basis, as well as, you know, the general programming. So, you know, hearing all of that, it really, I think, in my eyes, helped push my decision towards not chasing after a cultural and science center in the meantime that can house this collection. And if this is the solution that we have to follow to deal with it, then that's the solution we have to follow. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, is it an ideal time to be having a bill like this coming forward? Absolutely not. If you figure it out over the course of the term that was left, a 99-year lease, you're doing okay. But the point I'd like to make on it is we are sticking to our word as a city. This council said that we weren't going to leave the Imhoff collection or the Imhoffs themselves and their society in a bad position. And that was part of that contract, which was negotiated for us to terminate. And the city's sticking to its word. And that to me is a huge, important piece of this that may not be spoken in the request for decision or anything like that. The city made a 99-year commitment. We've negotiated an amicable departure from that agreement and stuck to what we said we were going to do. So I think that's commendable to administration and council. So, like I say, not an ideal time to have to terminate a contract, but the right time with all things considered.
Councillor Fagner.
Yeah, when we take a look at our other options, as far as I believe we had in the budget a couple of years ago, it was $1.5 million to replace the HVAC system, and it doesn't take long to realize that, yeah, that's the $500,000 is a bargain compared to that. And, you know, I appreciate what Councillor Buckingham is saying as well, keeping our word, doing the best that we could for the family, and we thank the family for the use that we have had over the years, and for their understanding and taking those paintings back. Thank you.
I would have to echo those words. I'd like to thank the Imhoff family and the Imhoff Heritage Society for coming to discuss this with the city, because it was an agreement that was signed by some time ago, but had a great deal of life left in it. And I think one thing that's a little different from when we hear about 99-year leases, it's not a 99-year lease with ownership. It was just a 99-year lease with the return of the vouchers. The prints, the paintings at the end of 99 years, so they don't become property of the city. They always have and will remain the property of the Imhoff Heritage Society. So I appreciate the work administration did to come to an amiable arrangement. And again, I appreciate the words spoken by council, that I think that it's important that the contract was entered on behalf of the city. And as we know, there's not always times that we have those things at the front end, but this is what we get to deal with when it happens. So I appreciate the direction council is looking at and where administration has brought us to this point. Councillor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to clarify some of my comments a little bit. In that, I don't want to discount the quality of the collection by any means, in terms of how good it actually is. You know, I have a brother-in-law who's an art teacher at the high school, and I know that this is going to make him furious at me, because he thought that the paintings were really important, that they're able to be displayed because of their quality. And, you know, luckily, you know, with the payout to the Imhoff family, there's potentially an option for them to be able to display them, hopefully somewhere in the not too far away from Lloydminster, but the spaces just aren't available within the city at this time, and won't be for some time. So, you know, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Thank you.
Any other comments? Not seeing any, I will look for direction on 8.1.3, the Imhoff Art Collection. Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. I move the council approve the payment of $500,000 for the Imhoff Heritage Society for the decommissioning of the Imhoff Art Collection from the Lloydminster Cultural and Science Center to be funded from the Lcsc Reserve Number 1-700-761-37115. Furthermore, the payment be subject to the finalization of all required legal documentation between the parties to properly release and the existing agreement to the house, or to house the collection.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Diachuk, thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, City Manager. Moving on to 8.3, Chief Financial Officer, City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 8.3.1, 2021 draft budget inquiries, I'll turn it over to our CFO, Nancy McDonald.
Afternoon, Mayor and Council. On October 1st, GPC meeting, we had the first draft of the 2021 budget for the City of Rochester, and we're looking for an opportunity for Council to give feedback as to any changes or any input as to how we would like changes to be made to that budget before we bring it back for a second presentation to Council in November.
Thank you, CFO. I'll look around the room for any comments or questions.
All right.
Councilor Buckingham?
I can start it off. You know, first off, I'd like to say I got a chance to spend some time going through the entire presentation and to all the teams within the city and looking at those business plans and everything as I did over the weekend. There's a lot of work that went into getting us to draft one, and I appreciate the distance we've come from year one of this particular council to now, seeing the quality of those and seeing that they're being shared with us, and the whole procedure and process that goes to getting us to draft one of the budget is not lost on me. So that's one to everybody in administration, and thanks for that, because it should not go unnoticed. The other thing about it is I see a team that's pulling in one direction, and I can appreciate that as well. I think direction was given by our city manager, and direction was followed by those people that put all that forward, and so none of that is lost on me. The fact that we put that out in a full-day GPC, I think is excellent. The timing of that is perfect. Something I want to see happen all the time, particularly for those that are letting their name stand for council going forward. It gives them an opportunity to really dive into that. And some people that are running did dive into that and take a look at that. I think that's important as we move the city forward into the next council term. I don't want to discount any work that was done in there. You know, the headlines are a little deceiving as to what that budget necessarily looks like as far as what the taxpayer is going to face, whether you're commercial or residential. There's some discussion on that. I just want to, my comments are simple, and it's that let's make sure we're looking one more time for needs versus wants as we move forward. It's a very difficult thing, and I know that budget has been scrutinized by city management and our ELT and everybody else, but one last look at the needs versus want perspective that you hear from the community and was reflected in some of the comments that came forward. I think the whole budget was based on needs versus wants, based on that community feedback. But taking a second look at that type of thing, I think is key to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible and sustainable going forward. And it's a really good job on that budget, but one more look doesn't hurt.
Thank you, Councilor. I'd like to add that certainly appreciate the work that's been done by administration. I think that the one thing that I've learned in the last 4 years, it's critical that, and we've heard this, and I looked at Councilor Baker, his comments in the past, again, needs and wants, and if we're going to do a study, we better be prepared to move forward with the results of that study. And I think that's why the next council, I would highly encourage them to ensure that if they're looking at that budget, if there's plans for a study to be done, there will likely be implications going forward for additional monies to be spent. Otherwise, why are we doing the study? I think that's the most important thing. Now, there's times when we will do a study to ensure the safety of staff, residents, individuals attending something or using the city facility, but I think that the most important thing to remember is that with a study, not to just simply put it on the shelf, be prepared that it may need to move forward. So that, I hope the next council looks at that and looks at from that perspective, because many of those items also on that budget are, as you said, Councillor, I think are in need. We often talk about water and sewer each and every time, and it doesn't matter if it's a wastewater treatment plant, the water treatment plant, or the infrastructure that delivers it to our homes and businesses every day. It's key and critical that we continue to maintain those, and that's some of the first requirements of this council and future councils, to ensure safe drinking water, our waste is properly meeting the requirements and dealt with that way. So there's a few challenges ahead of the next council. And I do appreciate the work that the administration brought forward. It was very clear and concise to the finance team. Again, thank you. I didn't get a chance to dive into it as deep as I wanted to, and I'm looking forward to those business plans because I think the business plans help outline where administration has taken the directive from the city, namely council, from the strategic plan to deliver what this community continues to look forward to. So thank you again. Councilor Dacha.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just reflecting that years ago, we used to say, you know, we need to do the same with less. And gradually over time, let's do more with less. And as we see the resources that are coming from other levels of government and continuing to put more pressure on the local ratepayer in terms of getting things done. And as we've gone through the budget and looked at those pieces, there are a lot of things that would be wonderful for the city to do. And part of the challenge is, as I've heard council and Your Worship say, you know, as going through this is that, you know, the wants need to move way the heck down the list of the needs in order to sustain where we find our basic resources to continue to present as a growing city are really at the core of that budget. And I think that's, you know, that's an important part to keep focus on. If people are expecting lots of bells and whistles out of this budget, I don't think that's reasonable. I think it's a tight budget, and understanding that, you know, we used to do the same with less, now we have to do more with less. And that's extremely challenging in today's environment.
Absolutely. Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, looking through the entire presentation and reviewing it kind of all over again, there was a lot that kind of jumped off the page at me. Some of those things are, you know, in the current year, we're benefiting, at least on the capital side, from getting a tremendous amount of grant revenue next year, which is a huge help to give us, you know, that shot in the arm that, you know, our economy needs, especially on, you know, some of the road work that can get done, the drainage work that can get done, and really it's going to be a huge help getting some of those funds from that other level of government to be able to get our kind of construction going, our local economy going. I think that's great for, you know, just even improving those basic services that we're saying those are our what we'll call needs. But at the same time, there's some things within there where, and I don't know that the mayor was referring to this or not, but there's items. The one that stands out to me was a deferred project that I would just like to see in a future draft of the budget for the next council to consider, would be to find a way either from cutting something else or from finding money within reserve, which is to continue to take those next steps on the DARP. And the reason I say that is because if you don't take the next step, from my understanding, that it's just becoming another project that sits on the shelf. And then it gets into a different discussion of wants and needs and what that really means. And I think my perspective is a little bit different from what I've heard around the room, because to me, we need to do economic development activities, and revitalizing your downtown is good for economic development and tourism and all those other things, and we need to do that. We need to be able to have more jobs that come with doing those things. It's about a quality of life question. We need to do those if we want people to continue to open businesses here and work here and live here. So it's not just about those basic services, which I think that we're doing a great job with in this budget of getting as much, you know, outside funding to do those things. But, you know, if there's opportunity to find within our budget something else on the capital side that can get pulled down, or that you can split it, you can make it more efficient. I don't know how we do it, but just to be able, or even using maybe some of the funds that are left over from the bid, if there's some of that you can use, plus you can grab something from somewhere else, that'd be great. But at the end of the day, that's your guys' job to figure it out. But I'm just curious, you know, where we can get to if we move forward on some of those projects, because otherwise it's a plan that sits on a shelf and we're not going to look at it for another 4 years. And there's so much momentum in the community around some of those things. So there's people who are putting their hands up saying, yeah, I'd like to start working on some of this stuff. But if we don't keep going and get the underground figured out, it's not going anywhere.
City Manager.
Thanks for the comments, Councillor. Following the meeting, we've talked about it as administration, and the two items we took out was the economic development side, the DARP. The other one was the social services side of it. The discussion was very helpful from council in terms of the direction that we heard from you. And so when we look at the next round of the budget coming forward to council and I guess, November, early December, that we would, we'll be doing our best to incorporate some of those comments back into the budget.
Thank you, City Manager. Any other questions or comments? I see we didn't give you a lot to work with, but we'll leave that to the next council because I think that would only be fair and fitting to, if it's going to become their budget, one that they will have to answer to the residents and explain to the taxpayers. So thank you for the work that you've done to this point, and thank you for getting us to where we are today at the end of 4 years as this council. Actually appreciate it to be very proud of a document that came forward first time and didn't have a $10 million price tag to it. I'll just mention that now, so thank you. Moving on to item 8.3.2. I'll let this in there.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 8.3.2, Capital Infrastructure, ISIP, Saskatchewan COVID-19 Resilience Stream Application Request, I'll ask Jacqueline Schwartz to come forward and present.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon, Jacqueline. Just give that little button, push them down. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Ah, better.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The recommendation today is that Council direct administration to submit the application for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program COVID-19 Resilience Infrastructure Stream in the amount of $4 million to be put toward the East Drainage Channel Rehabilitation 40th Avenue to Lake K project. In addition, that Council agreed to the potential of the City of Leominster contribution in the amount of $800,000 for the full duration of the agreement. On September 18th, 2020, the Government of Saskatchewan announced the opening of a new intake under the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. The new COVID-19 Resilience Stream supports infrastructure that is primarily for public use and or benefit. Projects must be located in Saskatchewan and fall within one of the following project categories: retrofit repairs and upgrades, COVID-19 response infrastructure, active transportation infrastructure, or disaster mitigation and adaptation. The city may submit one application for an infrastructure project with eligible costs between $100,000 and $10 million. The project must start before September 30th, 2020 and must be complete by the end of the 2021 calendar year. Applications will be accepted until October 30th, 2020. Typically, for municipal applicants, the federal government cost share under the ISIP program is up to 40% of the total eligible project costs. Under the new COVID-19 Resilience Stream, the federal government has stated that successful municipal applicants may receive up to 80% of the total eligible project costs. In the spring 2020 intake of the Investing in Infrastructure Canada program, the city applied under the Green Infrastructure Stream for the East Drainage Channel Rehabilitation Lake J to Lake K project. Unfortunately, the application was declined. The Sask Ministry of Government Relations has encouraged applicants to resubmit for projects that were unsuccessful if they meet the current eligibility criteria. Administration has determined that resubmitting with the East Drainage Channel project will have the highest likelihood of success given the Ministry's recommendation and the eligibility criteria. Since the spring 2020 intake, the city has moved forward with a portion of the previously submitted East Drainage Channel project. The current East Drainage Channel project, 40th Ave to Lake K, reflects the remaining scope of work that has not already moved forward with tendering or construction. This includes upgrades to Lake K's stormwater retention pond, the installation of control structure at the outlet of Lake K, and upgrading the channel between 40th Avenue and Lake K. If approved, the city's financial contribution will be significantly decreased, with the federal cost share covering up to $3.2 million of the total of $4 million in total eligible project costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Questions or comments? Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. I just wondered if it was possible, I know where this is, but is it possible to have an overlay of where this is in the city for those that might not know where it is?
Executive Manager Stang, would you?
Yeah, I can put it on my computer, or who's running?
Lake K is,
Yeah, even the description of it, I think, is probably good enough.
Lake K is, from what I understand, just southeast of the casino.
Right.
Casino, yeah. I'm not sure how large channel runs adjacent just behind the casino.
Yeah, just all the stuff that comes from the lake that's JC, and then down along 36th Street, across the 40th Ave, goes in behind there, and in behind the casino, and then
Yes, correct. The channel starts at 36th Street on the east side of the road, runs along south of the 41 Ave, which is south of the seal, and the channel part of the lake is in the east quarter of that. As for area of structure, and then the exit outfall structure was in the structure of that northeast quarter as well.
Yep, no, it's kind of pertinent to talk about it because we could have lots of people asking in the last few weeks, what's going on with all that dirt work on the north end of town? Well, that's all the northeast drainage. Oh, I didn't think that's what that was. Right, so just to bring it up to show people that's where it's going to be, where that work will be done if we move forward with that. Good, thank you.
Questions or comments? Councillor Torres?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I definitely think we should be putting this project forward. We know from our drainage system in general, initially when the stormwater levy came in, the number that was often quoted was about $50 million in capital upgrades that were needed over the next 20 years. So any amount that we can get from other levels of government just help ease that burden on the city so that we can get our finances in order over the long term even easier. Not to mention that individuals across the city pay federal tax on their payroll, they pay federal tax on their businesses. You're paying for these things. So now what you're asking for is for a little bit of your share to come back into your community, and programs like this are, it's great to be able to get some of those grants, to be able to get some of the value and the revenue and the wealth created in our community over a number of years back into our community and going somewhere where it can help us directly. So I definitely think it's a great idea to apply, and we should always apply when they come up, but this one especially because, when these kind of things come up and it fits the criteria, it's just good to get that stuff done. We know we've got drainage issues within the city, and they're not going away until we get the whole system to where it needs to be.
Councillor Fagin?
And I would echo very much with those thoughts, and just taking a look at it, anytime we can work with 25-cent dollars, that's pretty good. And it's nice that it was shovel ready. We were turned down by the Saskatchewan government, but the government as far as our initial application. But I'm very much in favor of moving forward.
Well, I think as you mentioned, anytime we can build on a cents per dollar basis, it's added value to the community. Dealing with from disaster mitigation and adaptation. I think moving stormwater is a serious issue and is a challenge that falls to the city. And anytime we can have the ability to improve it and lessen some of the challenges that the city faces in a severe weather event, it would be to the best interest of all residents, not just those that have had challenges in the past. And I think that adding the value that we are to that proposal, I appreciate administration bringing that one forward. $4 million chunk is a big piece of business. I think that they've looked at something that's suitable, that has the best chance of getting approved. Certainly we'll wait our turn and see, but appreciate it coming forward from the administration. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any, I would ask for direction. I guess we should just add why people might wonder why this has to come to council. Again, the same thing. This council will be committing a future budget of $800,000, but the rules are set out by the feds and the province, and we know we have to play them and move this forward by approval of council rather than simply an application from the city manager. The government wants to ensure that the community is serious and they're being supported by the elected officials, so that's why it's come to our table. With that, I'll entertain a motion. Councillor Fagin.
I move that Council direct administration to submit the application for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, COVID-19 Resilience Stream, in the amount of $4 million to be put toward the East Drainage Channel rehabilitation on 40th Ave to Lake K project. In addition, that Council agreed to the potential of City of Lloydminster contribution in the amount of $800,000 for the full duration of the agreement, 2020 to 2027.
Thank you, Councillor. Second, Councillor Dodger. Is there any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, John. Moving on to 8.5 operations, I'll look for the city manager.
Thank you, Worship. For 8.5.1, Ridgeline contract extension, I'll ask Karen Del Rose to come forward and present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council.
Good afternoon, Karen.
So before you today is a report on the Ridgeline contract extension with a recommendation that Council accept this report as information. So back in 2012, the City of Lloydminster entered a 10-year agreement with Ridgeline to accept and treat hydrocarbon contaminated soils. Ridgeline treats these soils to landfill criteria, and these soils are transferred to the landfill and used for landfill daily cover. Back in 2013, Ridgeline expanded its operations to include liquid waste, and the city receives a percentage of the tipping fees from these two waste streams. In 2019, the Saskatchewan Ministry of Environment implemented a quantity cap for landfills that are in the municipal landfill category. So this cap required the landfill to only accept up to 20% of the total waste received at the facility. So in order to receive more than the 20% industrial waste limit, the facility will need to be reclassified as an industrial landfill, and the council has made a decision to retain its municipal landfill classification. So Ridgeline's contract is expiring on May 1st of 2022, and administration is recommending that we include a 2-year extension of the current contract until May 1st of 2024. The extension will allow the city to reevaluate the future plans, the city and Ridgeline to evaluate future plans, and the extension will also benefit local projects by providing disposal options for impacted materials and recyclables, therefore reducing overall project cost. A request for decision will be brought forward in the next council meeting for consideration.
Thank you, Karen. Questions or comments? Karen, Ridgeline has an agreement in place till 2022 as it stands today. There is soils that are moving, I believe, after they've completed to the city landfill portion side. Where do we sit for a percentage of how many of those soils? What's our life expectancy, if that's the right word, to use those soils up that we currently have?
So, Your Worship, right now we do not have any surplus of soils based on our calculation. The soils that we have as of right now, and including any soils that will be generated until the life of the landfill, we have enough soils to use for our daily covering to cover the requirements.
So we're basically, and that would last until 22, like right now they're producing soil and we're basically consuming it fairly regularly then, is what I understand?
We do have a stockpile of materials at the landfill, so when we do our soil balance, we base it off of the total life of the site. So our site is expected to have a life expectancy of up until 2016, and based on our projections for soil quantities that are coming in and the quantities that are coming from Ridgeline, we will not generate a significant amount of surplus. We have just enough soils to use for cover.
So mathematically, we're in good shape, but we're not having an excess, is what I'm hearing based on that over the lifetime expectancy.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Councilor Thorson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So, given that your average person in the community may be actually surprised that the impacted kind of soils are ending up in the landfill, can you just give a good description of how we use them and whether or not there's any risk, I guess, to the community or even to the wastewater treatment plant that's directly adjacent or anything like that?
Sure. So impacted soils basically are soils that are contaminated with hydrocarbons. Ridgeline treats the soils to a level where it's acceptable for landfill use. So we basically use these soils as cover. So on a daily basis, we are required to cover the working face of our landfill. It will help with the wind-blown litter, also other vectors that are attracted to the site. So we apply a thin layer of cover on the landfill face to help mitigate that. So in terms of risk, we have a landfill. There is an engineered landfill cell, so we have layers of liners underneath that cell to help mitigate that risk.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Karen. I will look for council to, a motion to accept this as information. Councilor Radchak.
Move that council accept this report as information.
Thank you. Seconder. Councilor Fagan. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Karen. Moving on to agenda item 8.5.2. City Manager. Back to Karen. Welcome back, Karen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before you today is the request for decision regarding drainage repairs east of 75 Avenue and south of 29th Street, with a recommendation that council direct administration to proceed with drainage repairs east of 75 Avenue and south of 29th Street in the amount of $28,175 excluding GST to be allocated from the Storm Water Self-Supported Capital Reserve 1-300-350-37116. So in the beginning of 2020, the City of Rochester has been actively assisting to mitigate flooding on a property located at the County of Vermilion River, specifically west of 75 Avenue and south of 29th Street. The property owner maintains that the development east of 75 Avenue has created a blockage to the natural flow of water. We mobilize our own resources to pump the water east of 75 Avenue in an effort to mitigate flooding in the property owner's land, and to date we have spent over $6,000 in labor, equipment, and material costs to mitigate flooding and damage to the property. The property owner has requested that a more permanent solution be implemented to address the drainage issues. Administration has reviewed the owner's claim and has not reached a definitive conclusion as to whether the development east of 75 Avenue has impeded the natural flow. However, in order to mitigate flooding and damage to the property owner's property, or to the owner's property, we have identified and evaluated several options to improve drainage in the area. Based on the evaluation, a temporary localized ditching between 75 Avenue and Lakeshore Estates is the most effective solution that will provide positive drainage for low-lying areas east of 75 Avenue. This will also mitigate flooding risks to city properties adjacent to 75 Avenue. Initial estimated project cost for this proposed work is $25,800. Administration has initiated conversations with the County of Vermilion River to collaborate on a solution to this issue. Administration has issued a letter to the county requesting 50% cost share for the proposed work plan, and we have yet to receive a response. The proposed administration has also forwarded a request for quotes to local contractors, and one quote that we have received is a total cost of $24,500 with a 15% contingency. The total ask is $28,175.
Thank you, Karen. Councilor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So to be clear, the $24,500 or $28,175, that's the total cost, not a 50% cost if the county were to pay a share of it. It's the total cost.
That's the total cost for the entire project without the county's 50% share.
Okay. It's kind of an interesting situation, I suppose, with developments going on since then, and it's hard to say whether or not it's the city that created the drainage issue because of the developments that have gone on along there, or whether or not it's just high water tables and lots of water right now, and that's just kind of the issue. But in a way, we're kind of put into an interesting position because, in one sense, you could make the argument, one could, that that's the County of Vermilion's issue and they should be dealing with it. That's their problem, and I understand why we would be going to them to try and get some level of funding for this. But at the same time, I also understand that, you know, right now, we're in the process of submitting annexations and things like that to say that that area we would like to make a portion of Lloydminster. So, at the same time, there may be some responsibility for the city of Lloyd for this item down the road either way. But we know that the water is an issue and causing, you know, damage to that property right now. So as far as I'm concerned, I think we have to do the right thing, which is just make sure that it gets done. And I still think we need to have those conversations with the County of the Vermilion River, because I think they, in my opinion, do bear some responsibility. I don't think we should just stop having those conversations. But, you know, from what I've seen right now, I think I would support, based on what I've seen driving by there, that there is a small lake that doesn't appear it's supposed to be there that needs to be dealt with. So,
City Manager?
Yeah, in fairness, the county hasn't responded yet. They haven't said no yet either. So that,
right.
you know, we're just waiting for the response. The reason it's here today is more of a timing issue. We're a little bit worried about the winter runoff and so forth. So that's why we want to deal with it. And you know, the issue is all on the County of Vermilion Riverside resident, but it's also could impact the the west side, east side of the road, so area 75th, as Karen's indicated in her report, just outside of our residential subdivision too. I think it's a ways away from that, but it could get worse there too. So we're worried on both sides of the road.
Councilor Torson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Is there any risk to the road itself and the kind of the materials and everything that the road would be made of, or is that not really an issue just based on what's there?
Again, we wouldn't be rectifying this just for the road, but anytime you have water on either side of the road, there's risk that it eventually soak into your subgrade and start to deteriorate it. The biggest issue here is water's coming to the area and doesn't seem to really have a way to get anywhere else. So as you can see on the map, we're going to connect to an existing storm system and use some overland drainage as well as piping to get that area to be able to have a permanent, well not a permanent, a temporary 24/7 way to drain that water through. So right now what we've been doing to try and mitigate that is pump water, but we can only do that so many hours a day per day. This gives us the ability to drain that 24/7 because the pipe will be there. As water needs it, it will dissipate into the Parkview Pond to the east.
Executive Manager Stein, it's just so there would be work done this fall and there could be water moving. What do we have, can administration assure us that we won't end up freezing a culvert if that's part of this, or piping, and then get to next spring and cause even further flooding? Because if we have the trench, it'll get to a point and then it can't move anywhere. So is that part of operations, engineering? I'm not sure who, but how will that be addressed?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. That's a good question. It will freeze because it's surface more so than pipe. So what we'd like to do is have it completed here the end of October, early November, so it has some time to continue to drain this spring and be in place drain this fall and be in place for drainage come springtime. The culvert in road will function as is. We're not touching any of that infrastructure in road. So normal maintenance there will be doing all our culverts, so we'll be checking and maintain. This will just be another piece that our operations team will have to check come springtime to make sure it's clear and open, and if that means we need to steam it, we need to steam it. But it is open to atmosphere, so we're expecting it will freeze.
No, and that's good, because as long as it's on that checklist, then I'm sure if they're checking the culvert, it's just an extension of that drainage line. So just ensure that. Councilor Bragdon?
Thank you, Your Worship. But just wondering, as far as when they're doing the area structure plan and everything, is that not anticipated? Are they not looking at that and saying, hey, this could cause a problem, or is it just one of those things that slide by?
We take our overall storm into consideration through the master plans. As 75th Ave develops, there will be a storm truck that will come down 75th Ave to pick up Parkview Pond and any pond to the north of that, which then would have a storm main line, I guess, in 75 Ave that would pick up the ditch drainage and everything else. So we're just ahead of time. 75th Ave isn't developed. The storm trunk isn't there. Yet we're trying to deal with stormwater in our ditches. On top of that, there's other utilities that are in there that make it difficult to run stormwater across 75th Ave from the city. So that's another major challenge. And this temporary solution doesn't have any impact on those other utilities. So that's why we're recommending we do this and this time.
For sure, and it only makes sense. I mean, we've spent $6,000 pumping it up, and might as well get more of a permanent fix there. So no, thank you very much.
Councillor Batchor.
So, yeah, I think they may have answered this question. But so temporary solution, so temporary until the larger storm sewer lines get all connected and so forth. That's what I've gathered.
Yeah, temporary solution till either this area is developed or we have a storm trunk on 75th Ave or an extension of our storm trunk to 75th Ave to pick up drainage along the ditch. So one of the projects we've had in our queue for a few years now is the 75th Ave drainage actually north of here, which would be similar. In order to drain that, we have to get our infrastructure there. That seems to be a challenging task, just based on all the utilities that are in the corridor there. So permanent solution would be full development, storm trunk along 75th Ave, catch basins installed, water coming to the catch basins and dispenses. So there's a variety of different stages there where, you know, maybe the next phase from here is the drainage ditch, as well as a storm catch basin within the ditch to manage that water on a regular basis. But that's still a ways away as well.
Yeah, we're blessed with a few low spots in the city. We're seeing 59th there by the college, we're pumping water there too, so.
Yep, and a lot of those are related to infrastructure, urbanization of roads, stopping short and not extending the full route. So that's a part of those transfers. Yes, I agree with you. Some areas.
We're blessed.
We're blessed indeed. Any other questions or comments? Well, I'll look for direction from council on 8.5.2 drainage repairs east of 75th Avenue and south of 29th. Councilor Torson.
I move that council direct administration to proceed with drainage repairs east of 75th Avenue and south of 29th Street in the amount of $28,175, excluding GST, to be allocated from stormwater self-supported capital reserve number 1-300-350-37116.
Thank you, Councilor. Seconder, Councilor Diacek. Any further discussion to the motion on the floor? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Karen. Moving on to item number 9, bylaws, city manager.
Thank you, Worship. For 9.1, bylaw number 29-2020, supplementary assessment repealing bylaw, I'll ask Dan Watson to come forward.
I'm just hit it back. You got it.
I don't know if you cleaned them all up.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council.
Good afternoon, Dan.
Here today presenting the supplementary assessment repealing bylaw for second and third reading today. In brief overview and summary, we pass supplementary assessment bylaws annually. This is merely a clean up the books matter, getting some old ones that have served their purpose. They're no longer needed to be kept on our books as active bylaws, so we're just looking for a repealing bylaw to remove them. If there's any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you. Councilor Torres?
I'd be willing to make a motion.
I
I think we've gone through this one 3 times now.
We covered a little bit of ground. I would entertain that motion.
Yeah. I move that council grant second reading to bylaw number 29-2020, supplementary assessment repealing bylaw.
Seconded by Councilor Buckingham. Any further discussion on the motion at hand? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will, make the motion for the last one, but just, so everyone's clear, if you're seeing this for the first time, these are old, unused supplementary assessment repealing bylaws where there wasn't an automatic repealing bylaw when we ultimately set the mill rate, I think would be the time we were really doing. It normally automatically repeals. These ones did. So we are going to repeal them in person today in Cleveland. So I move that council grant third and final reading to bylaw number 29-2020 supplementary assessment repealing bylaw.
Seconder, Councilor Buckingham, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion at hand? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 9.2.
Thank you, Worship, for 9.2, bylaw number 30-2020, road closure repealing bylaw. I'll ask the city clerk to proceed.
City
Thank
Clerk?
you, Your Worship. And this is the third time we've seen this item as well. This is the council grant second and third reading to bylaw 30-2020, the road closure repealing bylaw. And council has seen this several times. The bylaws that are being repealed are spent and no longer in need. And I'll just pass it back to you and answer any questions that council may have on this.
Thank you, City Clerk. Councilor Buckingham?
Just one question. Can I make the motion?
Certainly, I would entertain a motion at this time.
I move the council grant second reading of bylaw number 30-2020, the road closure repealing bylaw.
Thank you. We'll look for a second. Councilor Fagner. Any further discussion on the motion at hand? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. I move the council grant third and final reading of bylaw number 30-2020, the road closure repealing bylaw.
Thank you. Seconded. Councilor Fagner. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion at hand? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, City Clerk. I think they call that red tape reduction. I'm getting rid of a whole bunch of bylaws off the books.
Just prior to the next item starting, we're just going to add some on the phone.
Certainly.
Yes?
Good afternoon.
Hi, Sue.
Yes,
Okay, you're connected in the council meeting now.
yes. I'll just put it on mute for now.
Thank you, Sue. This is Mayor Gerald Albers. Welcome to our meeting. Thank you very much
Yes.
for attending.
Good, thank you.
I'll just put it on mute for now. Thanks. She's got the computer on the back. If you could mute that, Sue, thank you. Sue, could you mute that, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you very much. Perfect. Appreciate that. Moving on to 9.3, City Manager.
Thank you, Worship. 9.3, for 9.3, bylaw 32-2020, Northeast Area Structure Plan and bylaw. I'll ask Anthony Miller to come forward for a second.
Good afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon, Anthony.
The recommendation is that Council grant second and third readings to bylaw 32-2020, being the Northeast Area Structure Plan bylaw. The drafting of the Northeast Area Structure Plan was initiated by Land Division to establish a clear vision and objectives to guide future development within the plan area, comprised of approximately 7 quarter sections. The ESP provides general information outlining future land uses, infrastructure servicing, transportation, and the potential phasing of development. It represents the development of a complete community with opportunities for various forms of housing types and densities, neighborhood and regional level commercial development, as well as industrial land uses. Complete mixed-use neighborhoods foster many benefits, including an improved sense of place, a high number of housing options, and an overall high quality of life as supported by Section 4.4 of the Municipal Development Plan. It is anticipated that the ASP will accommodate a population of approximately 6,500 people, along with 3,150 jobs within the commercial and industrial areas. The existing topography was a major consideration in the design of the development concept, which utilizes wetlands for drainage and stormwater management while providing opportunities for naturalized green space. The ASP is in compliance with provincial regulations, municipal policies, and infrastructure master plans. Public and stakeholder engagement played a role in the drafting of the document, beginning with stakeholder workshops held on March 27th and 28th of 2019. A public open house took place June 20th, 2019 to gather feedback on the preliminary land use concept and included an online survey. The referral period commenced September 3rd, 2020 and ended September 24th, 2020, which included internal and external agencies, adjacent and affected landowners, and was advertised on the Meridian Source September 3rd, 10th, and 17th, 2020. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, a virtual question form was placed online from September 21st through October 1st, 2020. Through the referral and public engagement processes, 4 responses were received. 2 of the responses were from affected landowners seeking clarification, which was addressed accordingly. 1 member of the public expressed support for the plan and its residential component. Finally, the rural municipality Britannia expressed opposition to residential uses within the most easterly quarter sections of the plan, which lay adjacent to their corporate limits. The response cites concerns over the potential for odor, dust, and noise resulting from future industrial development within the northeast ASP area. The plan seeks to mitigate these concerns through spatial and physical buffering along arterial roadways and including commercial and light industrial uses between medium industrial and residential uses. As a result of the referral and public engagement process, several changes have been made to the Northeast ASP since the document received first reading September 14th, 2020. Policies 4.8.9 and 4.10.7 were added to clarify the intent that all existing development within the plan area is considered to comply with the plan as opposed to only existing commercial development, which was the initial intent. Policies 4.11.6, 4.11.8, and 4.11.9 were also added or amended to ensure flexibility when development occurs within parks, open space, and recreational areas of the plan. All future development within the Northeast ASP subject lands will be required to comply with the approved ASP and MDP. Amendments to these documents will be required should development be proposed which is not compliant. Future amendments to the ASP may be possible to support future commercial development along the northern portion of Highway 17 if determined feasible by land division. This bylaw must be approved in conjunction with the approval of bylaw number 33-2020, Northeast Area Structure Plan MVP amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Questions or comments? Makes fine, Councilor Batchel.
Yeah, Your Worship, thank you. I guess just thoughts to the RN's response to our plan and where we sit on it.
Pardon?
The RN sent a letter as part of the package in response to our plan, so just, you can just maybe talk a bit about that.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't mind Sue actually answering.
Okay.
Sue, can you come on, Sue, to answer the question?
Yes. Hello?
Hello, did you hear the question, Sue?
I didn't. I don't have the best audio connection.
I'll ask Councilor Dychak to repeat the question.
Yeah, thanks. The question I have, I guess, is the RN has provided a response to the plan and about, where the commercial, industrial versus residential is and prevailing northwest winds and the impact potentially of sort of being a bit of a nuisance on the residential areas. I just sort of wondered what your thoughts are on that.
I think the plan reflects basically what we heard during the engagement, and there was certainly direction we received from that to make sure that there was a continuous residential corridor that went to the east side of the city. I think too that in order to have, like part of the plan is providing local services and amenities for the residential so people can walk to things. There was definitely, there were comments about wanting to have the services and amenities close to residential and north of the railroad track so that accessing wasn't interrupted if you had to wait for trains and that sort of thing. And in order to make, to get a community that's large enough to actually have those local amenities and services, you would really need both neighborhoods in there. I'm not sure if that's exactly answering your question.
So
it also reflects the balance that we got. There was a marketing report that was done that looked at the different uses for industrial, commercial, residential, and came back with needing a balance of those things in here. And so this reflects the findings of that report as well.
Okay, did that answer your question, Councillor?
Yeah, in part. I guess I just, when I read that part of it, I was just thinking about some of the pieces that were in there. And I understand that in the northwest winds that I do smell a certain odor that comes from the northwest that relates to a particular swine animal in terms of some of the waste that's there, and it does proliferate in the city every once in a while. But I mean, I guess I'm just thinking about that area and how attractive it is relative to the extent of sort of industrial commercial development in there. But I defer to planners because even where I live in the best laid plans, what we control externally is beyond our control. So, do we get the dust? Do we get, all of the byproducts from the harvest? Yes, and my allergies love them. And then on occasion we get the odd smell and odor that comes out from what goes out there. So I'm just thinking about what the impact would be for that area when you look at those prevailing northwest winds. So.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Sue. I guess that in previous discussions with the RM, certainly they have hopes and aspirations for their property that's on our east border to develop into potential from farmland. And certainly I think that they're concerned that to make that investment and to potentially follow through with that and then have sometime it's later time the city come back and say, well, we told you we were going to build residential. I can understand their concern. I think that's really, we need to keep that in mind front and center, and it's not about a race, but I think we also have opportunities potentially always to work with our neighbors that we want to ensure that we go forward positively and may have to come back and revisit this someday should and when the industry and business and opportunities arise in our city, and to work jointly with the RM of Britannia in this case, with being the adjacent landowner to potentially who knows what. And I think we've got lots of things on the go. We've got a transload facility study being worked on right now, and it's adjacent to railroad lands. I think it would be of interest to both parties as an example. So I think that something to keep in mind. I hope future councils will consider that if we do approve this plan, that there's room for change and being reviewed at that point from that perspective. Because again, as I've learned in the last 4 years, there's various steps to this process, and this is just one of the many steps. But we just need to keep in mind that things can change, and we do need to adjust accordingly from that perspective. As Councillor Diachuk said, I will defer back to the planners, but at the end of the day, I guess that the council can help influence some of that too as we go forward. Councillor Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two things. One, could I get you to just scroll to that other map, the coloring? And while you're on your way there, I just had some comments as far as just the general process. I'm actually really happy to see that we have somewhat of a product here at its final stages and going forward for the bylaw going through potentially, assuming everyone's votes in favor. But we have been, in discussion with the RM of Britannia on this particular area where they may have had some development, ideas and some zoning ideas where we just were not able to, give full blessing on something when we didn't have a good idea of what was going on the border of our city. And to be honest with you, they've had a difficult time with it, and it's been difficult to sit in the room with the RM of Britannia and say, yeah, we're still working on it, yeah, we're still working on it, yeah, it's coming at some point in the future. And I know that they've been frustrated, so hopefully they get the ability to market and develop or whatever it is that they've got on the go with us having a final solution to this. Yeah, so I just wanted a quick look at this. So is this map, in terms of the uses, has it changed since last time we saw it?
This has not.
Okay.
No, this is part of the MPP amendment.
Okay, I must have been looking at it from a different angle than I looked at it before. But my other comment I just had for the area structure plan, one of the things that I think is great to have in it is some area allocated for the cemetery, because I know that there's some issues at the cemetery that we've got to deal with, and we talked about it in the budget meeting last week. And then there's the question of a master plan on that cemetery as well. So just having some long-term kind of forethought into where we can expand the cemetery into, I think is a really good thing to do at this stage when we have the ability to plan and get something that's a decent size where we can do something into the future and not necessarily have to plan a cemetery in another area of the community at some point in the future, because we made the plan now to put it in a certain area. So now I know that doesn't seem like a big thing to some, but to me I think it's pretty important that we're at least planning for that, as well as the other recreation options and potential that comes with this. So you're going to potentially get different developers that say, you know what, I see value in starting to push there once we're 10 years down the road, whatever it ends up being, that you could have brand new neighborhoods, brand new communities in this area. And there's no question the city will always, at a certain point, continue to grow again. When I was a kid, I remember just when parts of Parkview were brand new, and I couldn't picture it as the big field on the way to my buddy's house that we used to walk through the field because they lived just on 75th now, and now it's totally developed. So really when things get moving and there's the right documents in place, it doesn't always take that long for it to really develop and to see those things. And especially with having there's Saskatchewan options for people to develop in, or if you wanted to have a business and start a business in, there's more options, and having those options I think is good. Good for development and good for the business community and good for residents to have that ability to find somewhere that fits with them. So in the long term, we're just happy to see it going through. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Executive Manager Stein.
Yeah, just what the map up on the screen now is what's in the area structure plan. That's what you were referring to.
So is that different?
Well, what the RM had presented is different than what's in our area structure plan. So in what the RM had presented in their letter showed purple, where like on the east side of 45th, they were showing purple there. So that was their recommendation back, is that they wanted that to be industrial. This is the area structure plan that's been brought forward by the planning department and ISL as our consulting engineer. If the city was going to take that into consideration and look at changing that to industrial, we would probably have to go back to the table and take into consideration whether there would be enough R1 in that small little pocket to make it worthwhile having R1 residential in that area. So this allows residential growth from north of the golf course in the eastward direction. And when development happens out outside our boundary, as an area structure plan, statutory document, they should be taken into consideration what the city is going to be developing in the future. And if there's a change, as your worship talked about, that's something that would need to come back as an area structure plan amendment. And both parties would need to be agreeable to that change. So I just want to throw those thoughts out there as well.
No, I think that I hear what you're saying, Executive Manager Stang. Thank you, and I think that I appreciate what the planners have on the table. I think that I just hope that future councils will take into account that is a plan, and plans can change. It may take some work, I think that I don't want to leave the county, the RM, thinking that we are prepared to change immediately, but in the same token, we're working with planners. But at the same token, I think we also have to be cognizant of some of their needs, and that's one of the challenges that we have. And as the planners have proposed, there is mitigation that can be hopefully done depending on what comes into that backside. I think we're both in the same boats as municipalities. We're waiting for growth to come. It's not lurking around the corner immediately, but we never know where a change is going to happen. So, from that perspective.
Yeah, I think those are great points. There isn't development evident in the area from our perspective, or we're not going in and developing this today or tomorrow. So this is the future plan of how we're going to keep that going.
I appreciate that.
And I think, Your Worship, it's important to note that from a development perspective, we don't want to limit the residential growth just in certain parts of the city. And by ensuring we have residential development here, that means that we have some equity, some growth going in all directions. Otherwise, we really lock ourselves into a pathway and a model that says, here's all industrial on one end, residential on the other end, as opposed to creating a diversity around the city. And I think this captures that diversity, an opportunity for residential growth there.
And that's that long-term picture. Without a long-term picture, you don't end up anywhere. So hopefully we can mitigate those, and future councils can mitigate that through accordingly. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any. I will look for direction from council on 9.3 bylaw number 32-2020 Northeast Area Structure Plan bylaw. Councilor Gotcha.
Move that council grant second reading to bylaw number 32-2020 Northeast Area Structure Plan bylaw.
Look to seconder. Councilor Monroe, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion at the hand? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Gotcha.
Move that council grant third and final reading to bylaw number 32-2020 Northeast Area Structure Plan bylaw.
I'll look for a seconder. Councilor Thorson, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion at hand? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to 9.4. City Manager to Anthony.
All right. The recommendation is that council grant second and third reading to bylaw number 33-2020, being a bylaw to amend map 2, future land use municipal development plan, as per schedule later. Alignment between the MDP and the Northeast Area Structure Plan is necessary for legislative compliance and to establish clear guidelines for future development. Therefore, along with the draft ASP, an application to amend the MDP was also submitted by Land Division. Of the approximate 509 hectares of land included in the draft plan, approximately 395 hectares, mainly comprised of farmland identified as urban expansion in the MDP, will need to be amended to commercial, parks, trails, and open space, residential, and industrial within map 2. The plan area also includes established highway, commercial, and industrial development, as well as the City of Woodminster Water Treatment Plant. As these developments comply with the existing MDP and draft ASP, the remainder of the lands do not require redesignation. Upon completion of the draft ASP, a referral process commenced to solicit additional public and stakeholder feedback, which ended September 24, 2020. While the responses pertain predominantly to the ASP itself and are addressed within a separate report, the RM of Britannia has expressed concerns over the intent to designate lands along the eastern edge of the plan as residential and prefer to see industrial uses adjacent to their boundary to support industrial development within the RM itself. Through amending the future land use within the MVP, administration will ensure that future development complies with the overall intent of the ASP and the MVP. Prior to development occurring, map amendments to the land use bylaw will be necessary to ensure consistency with the MVP and ASP. Since first reading on September 14, 2020, no changes have been made to bylaw 33-20. This bylaw must be approved concurrently with bylaw number 32-2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Questions or comments? So, Anthony, hypothetically, the RM of Britannia comes to the council of the day in 5 years before we've moved over on 40th Avenue to the east of 40th Avenue, and they say we are looking at doing a development to the second quarter coming north, which is urban expansion to residential. Say we have a proposal, it would go through the LPDC, and then it would likely have to come back to our city council to consider doing an amendment to this plan. Potentially, that would be the process that would happen.
Yeah, that's correct. We would take a look at the ASP, what they're proposing, and we would need to amend it, both the ASP and NDP.
Yeah. So it is possible, and I think that's what I want to reassure the RM of Britannia. I understand the concern. I did speak to the Reeve directly, and he certainly just, the bottom line was he didn't ask to be put in a box or the RM, and I understand that. And for good neighborship, future regional development, and I'll say regional development and opportunities, I don't want to ensure that, I don't expect to be sitting in this chair in 5 years, but if whoever is and the council around the table would hopefully take that into consideration, because I think that's very important. And we've talked about regionalization, we've talked about development and growth for our community and the greater community, because our community ends at a boundary, but our community also serves the greater community around us. And I think it's just very, very important that that is known. And I know it's without changing it, but this is a plan, and as we've talked about, this council has in the past helped change plans with the support of administration from that perspective, or their encouragement with proposals, and we'll continue to do that. But I think that's the important thing I want to be left with, is that there's opportunity to work with our neighbors, because the last thing we want to do is hem them in, nor do they want to hem us in, but we'll see where the event takes us from that point of perspective. So just wanted to make that publicly clear to those that are adjacent neighbors. Any other comments? With that, I will look for direction on 9.4. Councilor Batchak.
Move that council grant second reading of bylaw number 33-2020, being a bylaw to amend map 2 future plan use concept of the municipal development plan as per Schedule A.
Thank you. Look for a seconder. Councilor Thorson, thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion at hand? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Batchak.
Move the council grant third and final reading of bylaw number 33-2020, being a bylaw to amend map 2 future land use concept of the municipal development plan as per Schedule A.
Thank you. For a seconder. Councilor Thorson, thank you very much. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Sue, for joining us. Thank you, Anthony.
Good, thank you.
Moving on to item number 10, Mayor and Council reports. I have nothing written to report at this time. Certainly, we have now have part of the city engaged in this provincial election in Saskatchewan, so I would encourage the residents of the Saskatchewan side of the city to be ask them to reach out and get informed about their candidates that are running, seeking the political ambitions from that perspective for the provincial legislative seat that's up for election. And as we all know, we're entering a municipal election. Remind individuals that are interested in council that nominations, I understand, close at 4 p.m. on the 7th of October. And for those that have declared, I wish them all the best luck in their campaigns. Any other comments around the council table? Not seeing any, I'll look to for any other matters at this time that this council needs to deal with. Not seeing any, I will look to inquiries from the media.
Thank you, Your Worship. Today we have an interview request for Councilor Monroe and yourself, Mayor Alderson.
Thank you. I will look for an adjournment. Councilor Buckingham has it. Thank you very much.